y'all, welcome back. Today I am talking about book reviews, specifically why I don't do them more often and why I find them so hard to do. One of the most watched videos on this channel is one I did ages ago about writing fantasy as a Christian, and at the time that was something I was really wrestling with because of sort of my lifelong struggle with legalism and how legalism really tripped me up when it came to tackling the fantasy genre. While I'm really thankful that that video has resonated with so many people, I'm also really thankful that I'm not in that place anymore, and a lot of the things that tripped me up then don't trip me up now. Thank God. However, legalism still rears its ugly head sometimes, and one of the areas where it does that really often is randomly book reviews. Now, reviewing books is something that I actually really enjoy doing. I like being critical when I'm reading, but in general, they're kind of something that I stay away from for a few reasons. Reason number one, I am a very genuine person, so unless I can say something and really mean it, I generally don't say it. And if I have something that I really feel was a struggle, like if I'm reading a book and I had something that I really didn't enjoy, I feel obligated to share that in the interest of being like upfront and honest. To me, that's like the difference between like actually reviewing a book versus just like promoting a book or recommending it. However, if I'm ever in a position where I'm saying something like slightly less than positive about a book, then I also feel like I have Thumper from Bambi in the back of my head going, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Which is great advice, but that always kind of gives me pause, and then I just talk myself out of it and end up cutting 70% of the things I was going to say. Admittedly, it's easier with like bigger name books. I had a lot of fun, for example, reviewing the Wheel of Time series, because like there's no danger of the Wheel of Time series suffering because of my little review. But when you're dealing with like smaller scale or like indie writers or, you know, Christian faith-based books, then I always find it really hard to strike that balance between like being honest and being somewhat critical for the people who are looking for like an honest review, but also like being generous to the people who put so much time and energy into the books. I don't know, I think I might just be too much of a people pleaser to make that happen. Case in point, guys. Anecdotal evidence for you. I went to a Blue Jays game this weekend. I don't really care much about baseball, but we had tickets and it was a reason to go to the city, and baseball games are fun, even if you don't fully understand all of it. I had Blue Jays fans on one side of me and a couple of Yankees fans on the other side of me, and my social brain just did not know what to do with it. Like, I felt guilty if I cheered for the Blue Jays, my home team, because I felt like I was like offending the Yankees fans. But then I also felt like personally responsible for making sure that my Yankees friends next to me had a good experience with Canadians. So if any Blue Jays fans were getting too, you know, rowdy, then I was like, oh my gosh, like, do I apologize? Like, I don't know what to do. I'm like clapping for both teams because I'm afraid to cheer too vigorously for either side. It was like ridiculous. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is like a moment of self-discovery. I am a true people pleaser. Like, I really did not realize that it was that bad. So, all that to say, I apparently care way too much about what people around me think of me, and for some reason, that really stops me from doing book reviews. Which brings me to reason number two. This is more kind of related to legalism and that ingrained fear of like what other people think and of being judged. This is something I've struggled with for a really long time, since long before I ever started a channel, but I've always found it a little bit difficult to talk about the books I'm reading or, you know, the movies I'm watching or whatever, for fear that somehow it will affect the way I'm perceived. Mainstream fiction often has stuff in it that maybe doesn't perfectly align with my biblical values, and I wouldn't expect it to. But there is that sort of niggling voice in the back of my head that like I'm almost scared to be too open and say, oh yeah, I'm reading this, or I really enjoyed this, which is very much like a legalism thing. Again, if you have never struggled with this, then this will all sound totally irrational to you, and I am so happy if it does, because I wouldn't wish this on anyone. But if this is resonating with you, you know exactly what this is like when you're so concerned about what everyone else thinks that you don't really have that space to like actually discern for yourself what you think. For example, in a recent video I mentioned that I had just finished reading Rebecca Ross's Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, and that I really liked them and was planning to buy them. Guys, I agonized over that admission. Like, even after the video was already published, I debated going back in and like editing that part out because I knew that there were like a couple things in those books that, you know, didn't align with my values, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if that's an issue for someone? And just, yeah, I totally was like stressing about it. And in the end, I just had to sit back and say, okay, did you enjoy it? Yes. Are you planning to buy it? Yes. Do you feel guilty about that? No. Then why do you feel guilty saying that? We are all on a journey, and I'm really thankful for how far God has brought me in being able to like make decisions for myself about these kinds of things. And I know that in time, I just need to grow more secure in the knowledge that like, if I decide to buy a book or to read a book or say I like a book, it's because I have thoughtfully decided that the redeeming qualities outweigh the not so redeeming qualities for me personally. And that's my conviction. And I just need to be assured of that and like trust that that is a conclusion that the Lord helped me to come to. It has gotten better, and I am more secure in that than I ever was before, but still that doubt and that sort of like fear of how you're going to be perceived is still there, and that often comes into play when I'm trying to decide whether I want to review a book or not. Most of the time, I just end up saying, you know what? Maybe I won't. And that brings me to the third thing that I find really hard about book reviews, especially in sort of like a Christian context, is the big question that often gets asked is like, how clean is it? And I used to think of clean as like a very cut and dry thing, but recently, and like based on things that I've been seeing on social media among bookstagrammers and stuff, I'm realizing that clean is not really a one-size-fits-all term. And I don't mean that in the sense of like moral relativism, but in the sense that it can be sort of a moving target. For example, let's go back to Divine Rivals for a sec. There was a time, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I would have stopped reading that book right in the middle because of the love scene. It does have a love scene in the first book, which is open door, non-explicit. I would not have known that at the time. If I were younger, it would have been, oh my goodness, get it away from me, gross, gross. And admittedly, that would have been the right choice at that time in my life. I wouldn't have been ready for that. There wouldn't have been a need for me to read that. In general, I am against like intimacy in YA because I just feel like the characters are not ready for it, the readers are not ready for it, and in general, it undercuts the actual value and meaning, taking it out of its proper context, the context that God intended. So I'm not really for it. However, I am not 15 or 16 anymore. And so reading Divine Rivals, I noticed that like my whole thought process was totally different than it would have been back then when I encountered this scene. It was like, okay, how is this being portrayed? Is it explicit? Or is it like reserved and understated? Is it being portrayed as something that just like anybody can do whenever they want because they feel like it? Or is it being portrayed in like the beautiful God-created context of like one man, one woman committed in marriage for life? In Divine Rivals, the scene is on their wedding night. Like they have committed to each other in marriage first. And I was like, wow, that's so refreshing to have it done in the context of marriage. I just thought that was really cool. And I actually came away really encouraged by it, which was interesting because like the very thing that would have made me stop reading the book a few years ago is the thing that made me go like, wow, nice. Now, it just goes to show that your idea of a clean book can like actually change over time. Not in the sense that your standard slips necessarily, but your standard might like grow and mature with you as you grow and mature. Which makes it really hard to like recommend books because everybody's in a different place and what's okay for one person might not be okay for the next. And it makes it really difficult to decide like what things are worth mentioning and what things are just like fine. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone to like a review site for movies or something for like, you know, the concerned viewer, and they just list every possible issue. And it makes the movie sound like it's like horrible, but then you watch the movie and it's like there was nothing wrong with this movie. I feel like that's the risk you run when you try and list too many things and like list all the issues that could possibly be problematic for any reader. It's not really fair to the book. Like it makes the book sound worse than it probably is, but at the same time you don't want to like leave something out that could then surprise someone later. I just really struggled to handle that with certain books. Book reviews. You wouldn't think that they would be that much of an issue, but for me, I do find them to be a struggle area. I haven't yet found a technique, a way to do it that I feel 100% good about, and I think it's probably like a practice makes perfect kind of thing, so I'm not giving up. I do think that in time, as I grow and as the Lord continues to work on me, I will find it easier and easier, and I'll be able to be more secure in the choices I make when it comes to book reviews. However, at the moment, if you've ever wondered why I don't do more of them, that's why. Usually I just stick to reviewing books that I already know and love, because raving a mile a minute about things I love, you guys already know, that's my jam. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Even if all the things going on in my brain didn't fully make sense, thank you for bearing with me. As always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.